There's really something to be said for the way our culture has evolved to accommodate modern technology. We see its influence everywhere. We've watched entire industries ditch their physical platforms in favor of a more appealing online market. Our high school dramas are now obliged to awkwardly insert smartphones and social media into their outdated premises, and it seems like businesses and manufacturers are shifting their focus towards connecting everything we do to our online experience. Is this a new observation? Did I really need to introduce this video topic with a statement we've all probably heard a million times before? No, probably not, but I want you to keep that thesis in mind. If you look back to those examples I listed, they all have something in common. To spare you from thinking too hard, I'll tell you what that is. They're all reaped from the products of the industry. What is the industry? Well, it seems to be that invisible force which decides what is popular. The music industry, the movie industry, the TV industry, the news industry, they're all allegedly in cahoots. Together, these cards combine to summon an exodia of sorts, more commonly referred to as pop culture, a seemingly unified truth of what the public deems to be, well, pop. It's often paraded around as some sort of boogeyman. It's this capitalist, or socialist, organization controlled by a conspiratorial hive mind responsible for brainwashing the youth in order to take over the world by making our tastes worse, I think. It's not entirely clear what this pop culture stands for. Now, since I've been sarcastic about it for long enough, do I really think this organization exists? Well, not entirely. At least not anymore. That's not to say I don't think that some aspects of this pop culture are true, but there is definitely a lot more room for nuance than this definition suggests. The industry, or the media, has undergone some significant changes over the years. While trends have and always will be set in many cases by the ordinary public first, and picked up by the mainstream second, big business had much more control over what we saw and heard back in the good old days, back when artistic expression was required to cycle through heavy filters before it could be shown on TV or the radio. These barriers still exist, of course. However, something rather large and exciting has changed this oppressive landscape for good. That something is called the internet. The internet has turned popular culture into a much more diverse and complicated landscape. Again, the aforementioned industry, although it may not be so prevalent now, still exists here, and censorship has not yet been eradicated, but the availability of platforms where virtually anyone can host and broadcast content has pushed us one step closer to a free market. Pop culture is no longer simply what the industry wants it to be. Opportunities have expanded to new areas and territories, and the media is controlled now by the people who watch it more than ever. Technology has altered our culture and the way we consume it for good. Now, that's great and all, but you're probably asking what this has to do with the topic of the video. And I'd ask you to wait for just a little longer so I can explain. This media autonomy we possess is a strange and fickle thing. The vapid, artificial, commercially driven content many people associate with pop culture still exists online, and it will inevitably still be popular, but the sheer vastness of content and personalities available to us now allows us to form our own cultures, or subcultures, cultures based off of culture. You are far from forced to watch and consume only what YouTube directly promotes, and in most cases, you can go about your stay on the website without ever touching a popular vlog channel. These subcultures are even capable of surpassing the popularity and notoriety of things included in the pop culture bubble in select cases. The point here is, rather than being solely determined by what corporations want to put out, whatever is in with the masses is controlled by a plethora of additional factors. And, in numbers, fans of even the most inherently unusual and uncultured media can have their voices recognized by the coveted industry. But what does this all mean, you still ask? What does all this talk about the media have to do with anything? Well, Strawman, I'm glad you brought that up, because this leads perfectly into the main discussion of this video. The progression of the internet and mainstream media was perfectly primed for the advent of memes. In and of itself, the topic of memes is odd and difficult to discuss analytically or critically without coming off as uneducated and out of touch, because this isn't exactly stuff that needs to be thought too deeply about. The culture around memes is complex and changes rapidly, so it's never a good idea to linger. When you're enjoying memes, the experience is not all that multidimensional. It's only when you aren't up to date with the culture that they cease to make sense and you start to question them. Memes are one of those special things that couldn't have existed without the advent of technology, disregarding the obvious fact that they're a digital medium. Though they've branched off into a multitude of different categories and capitalized on a wealth of source material, their humble beginnings, and to this day many of their current forms, are primarily built off of culture. Taking something that already exists, say a movie or a game, and interpreting it with the personality that only the individual can provide, satirizing often the simplest of quotes and screenshots, and in some cases the very existence of the media itself, these are common practices of old and new memes. Virtually anything has the potential to become humorous. In some cases, all you really need is a context. While this aspect of memes has remained fairly consistent, more has changed than just the object of satirization over the years. Separating memes into the periods of time when they were relevant will reveal styles of humor fundamentally different from one another. A rage comic couldn't exist in the popular meme landscape of, say, 2017, and that's not just because the fad has already come and gone. They are, by their fundamental use of comedy, completely different from each other, and that's not because any one format is more matured or universally funny than the other. What meme culture deems entertaining has experienced major growth and change over the years, almost as if it has passed through different eras altogether. Just like any former time, 2018 has its trends in popular memes. However, one thing that has become increasingly relevant to people outside the culture is the fact that these jokes seem to be turning more and more bizarre and surreal. Many older memes have a context set up and punchline all clearly visible. However, in the case of a growing number of modern memes, the entire joke seems to be making content as outrageous, outlandish, and aesthetically unusual as possible, and many of those out of the loop are starting to wonder why. What about T-posing was inherently funny? What about deep frying an image increases its comedic value? Well, concerned parents, I want to reassure you that there are no hidden subliminal messages in the funny images your child downloads from the hacker known as 4chan. I think that there are perfectly reasonable and logical explanations behind this phenomenon, and while I can't tell you the specific reason for everybody who enjoys this type of humor, I want to present a few theories regarding the trend, and maybe, along the way, introduce some interesting proposals about the meme economy itself. My name is Scorchley, and welcome to today's Ramble. Before I introduce my speculation on the subject of current media, I want to express a proposition about how we got here in the first place, or more specifically, what pressures the meme landscape to change. For an economy founded upon something as simple and lighthearted as an inside joke, the meme community is incredibly harsh and unforgiving. Just sharing a meme is incredibly risky business. Hell, I'm nervous as I'm scripting this video. The cycle is about as vicious as they come. Back in the day, these references were far more comforting. They were ways of identifying your people, of associating yourself with fellow fans of the media you enjoyed. On a smaller scale, it was just like a joke between friends. However, as more names joined the pool, the identity memes granted began to distort. Once specific to a very narrow niche, this method of exchanging contextual references caught on with the general public, and a delicate hierarchy was constructed. Memes were no longer made popular by the media they referenced. These quirky little inventions caught on so thoroughly that they gained the power to popularize their own niches. Memes took control of the very culture they were created by. To make things even more complicated, meme culture itself became a war zone of sorts. The people who had at one point used memes to isolate themselves from pop culture had to find a new way of separating themselves from the crowd. Thus arose the meme elitists. If you've ever been involved with modern trends, you'll be well aware of how fragile and fleeting viral fame can be. A typical modern meme will most likely follow this life cycle. First, it will be conceived. From here, it could be hours or years until it is picked up by the mainstream. Next, it will achieve its peak quality. The meme elitists will use it freely, and in this brief period, it is fresh. This is far from its peak popularity, but here it has met the perfect conditions. It is gaining notoriety, but isn't quite mainstream. Meme elitists are like any other counterculture enthusiasts. Everything has to be trendy, but just obscure enough so that it cannot be tainted by those deemed unworthy of consuming it. After its prime is past, the meme will get big, and the normies will claim it. The meme elitists will suddenly shift from appraisal to rejection, and from here things will only get worse. Finally, at the end of its life, we'll see its twilight years. At best, it will fade into obscurity, used only sparingly by out-of-touch adults and corporate executives, and at worst, it will be mocked obscenely by the very people who once brought it life. At the head of this cycle are, of course, the elitists. They regard themselves to be the true content curators, the only people genuinely capable of deciding what memes are worthwhile. They are responsible for initiating every step of the cycle. While they are rarely responsible for making the content which is being satirized, they still regularly assert that they are the creators of these memes, and thus that they have every right to single out the normies. Although it may sound like I don't like this group of people, and I guess it's kind of true, I'm not exactly a fan of any elitists, I can understand why they treat memes this way. These meme elitists often put a painstaking amount of time into confirming that they are behind the loop on what memes are cool. As much as they are in control of the meme economy, they are also controlled by it. To be an elitist, you have to be omniscient about the subject matter, and never, ever should you be caught endorsing normie memes. It's a tough job just to have the title. You must be ahead of the curve on every single meme, know what's popular before it hits, and know exactly when and where to cut ties. This rigorous test of wit all comes about as a result of the market's oversaturation. When dealing with the internet, no inside joke is sacred. Inevitably, your cozy, light-hearted little references have every potential to be cannibalized by the ravenous public, distributed among masses and masses of normies, the very people that you, a reclusive outcast, tried to shelter yourself from by creating these jokes. Why can't they just stick to their own content? Why can't I have my obscure interests? I personally think that anybody can enjoy whatever they want as long as it isn't intentionally harmful, so obviously I disagree with excluding so-called normies from enjoying a meme, but I can see why it's so unrealistically upsetting. It feels like somebody is trespassing on your personal property. It hurts. With that being said, we can make a few general assumptions about meme death. Firstly, it is the elitists who kill memes. While there is a general consensus that it is the normies who are independently responsible for trends dying, and this isn't entirely untrue, if it weren't for elitists disowning their media, the retiring of memes would be far less abrupt. These elitists are the ones that set trends. They decide when a meme becomes popular, and everyone else follows. Consequently, they decide when a meme dies, and even if it doesn't happen immediately, the public will catch on. Secondly, a meme dying is just an inevitable fact of life because that's just what they're designed to do. I'll put it this way, a meme is just a joke. What makes memes so appealing is the fact that they can be both a setup and a punchline. Ultimately, memes are just glorified references, but what makes them special is their versatility, their remix value, if you will. You can change a meme to have a different meaning entirely, or you can use the meme to alter the intention of an existing joke. When the punchline or setup is something as simple as a reference, it opens a meme up to a wide variety of interpretations. However, jokes are only funny for a certain amount of time. While remixing a meme is not the same as telling the same exact joke over and over again, it still makes use of aggressive repetition. Realistically, you can only stand to see something so many times until it gets tiring, and in the case of something as popular as memes, that exhaustion hits hard. A meme is doomed to recycle itself until it becomes stale, and if you combine this inevitable fact with the aforementioned behavior of meme elitists, you get a perpetual ritual of jokes being repeated until they become not only exhausting, but flat out unbearable. While the meme itself has and always will be the same in its source material, our opinions towards it will change based upon psychological factors. The meme doesn't change its shape, our perception does. Our sense of humor has not gotten collectively more logical and mature since the advent of rage comics or Grumpy Cat. We don't find them funny anymore because they were capitalized on to the point where seeing them is just sickening. In small doses, something as simple as a format will become inherently unfunny. In the most severe, wider scale, entire styles and genres of humor will lose their appeal. In the end, the psychological impact of memes isn't all that difficult to hypothesize. Virtually any trend falling out of fashion can be boiled down to a combination of these relative factors. Personally, however, I must admit that the cycle is a bit depressing. It's upsetting to have something, a novelty or reference that you like, subject itself to the torment of endless repetition until you develop an unshakable aversion to it. In the same way that something you like can feel ruined by becoming mainstream and gaining a wide fandom, a funny meme has the same fate, only worsened because it is designed to do so. It's not exactly as simple as ignoring societal pressures. With all that being said, I think that the current state of memes has something to do with this cycle, as any wave of memes does. However, this still doesn't answer the question of why. Why all the surreal imagery? The easy answer would be to say that it's just another phase, a byproduct of the meme cycle, and when I was first conceiving this video, I would have left it at that. However, I saw something that really made me think about this whole situation. I'm about to dive into much more experimental, uncertain territory, but I'd like to offer a possible explanation to why our society is optimized for weird humor. I saw this tweet on my feed a while back, and my first reaction was, oh hey, what's that? Curious and reasonably skeptical, I did a bit of surface research on data, or data? I don't know. I'll just call it data. Dada refers to the European artistic movement of Dadaism, which was popularized during World War I, so I'll give them that much for correctness. I can see how someone would interpret these things to be connected. Dadaism as an artistic movement is characterized by aesthetic nonsense and satirization, so it is quite similar to modern memes. However, I have to say I don't believe this claim for one major reason. Dadaism was a conscious choice. I doubt whoever created the meme was trying to protest late-stage capitalism. I'd go as far as to say that a lot of meme creators would vehemently protest any dissociation with capitalism, so this definition doesn't account for them. Dadaism is a specific movement, not a general phenomenon, and the movement itself probably shouldn't be used to classify a subconscious preference. So that's the end of it, right? Dadaism and late-stage capitalism have nothing to do with memes. Well, just you wait. While I was fairly positive that these two separate occasions had nothing to do with each other, a bit of a nagging feeling started to drag me along. What if there really is some psychological connection between capitalism, society, and surreal memes? It sounded like political drivel at first, but after giving it a bit of thought, I started to wonder if maybe capitalist society does have something to do with this inexplicable occurrence. Now, don't get me wrong, I love capitalism just as much as the next guy. I'm not opposed to living in a capitalist nation, and I'm not advocating for socialist replacement. Capitalism isn't all bad. I mean, how could it be if it brought us weird humor? I love weird humor. However, I do think that capitalism, or rather a facet of it, commercialism and media, has something to do with this. Let's talk about that. This all goes back to the intro of this video when I discussed pop culture. From the beginning, memes were designed to serve as a shield from the mainstream. They were an obscure piece of context and reference which outsiders, people on the fringe, could use to sort themselves out from a crowd, a way to decorate their safe spaces on the World Wide Web. Back in the day, as with almost all things new and exciting, the internet and social media were a great place for geeks and outcasts. Memes were just another way to distinguish yourself. If you'd like to watch a more humorous video which talks about this subject, I've linked an Lemon title about it in the description, so you can feel free to check that out if you haven't already. The point here is that memes used to be a way of avoiding pop culture, a literal secret code for their users. They capitalized on the obscurity of the media being parodied to express an unconventional interest in an undetectable fashion. With a concept as broad as a meme, which can range in content and execution so vastly, it was inevitable that more and more people would indulge in the practice of meme sharing. Everyone, even those not typically considered outsiders, wanted to feel like they were a part of a joke, and to invent their own remixable trends to share with the rest of the community. It had every opportunity to turn into something universally connective, a permanent bridge between the awkward outcasts and the mindless normies. But somewhere along the line, a third party intervened. That party was commercialism. The seemingly universal appeal of memes caused this trend to seize pop culture like it hadn't been seized before. Everyone wanted to feel like they were in the loop, like they were a part of the joke. You either understood the context or you didn't. And as more and more people, kids, normies, began to invest in this strange online phenomenon, more companies began to take notice. Even if it's something genuinely useful, a lot of commoners have a built-in aversion to being blatantly sold to. Monetization is always a sketchy topic for any media creator. As a result, to keep ads from doing more harm to your product than good, advertisers take advantage of a variety of different methods to either emotionally manipulate or appeal to their target audience. Some will paint their product to be associated with sad or heartwarming things to guilt their audience into supporting them. Some will try their hand at comedy, and even still others will go heavy on the subliminals, implying that their product is the key proponent of a happy, successful life, and playing to the subconscious fantasies of an average consumer. Even with all that in mind, this still leaves certain demographics excluded, and while a general audience is always welcome, there is a great deal of power within each specific category. How can one market a brand to be something personal, more than just a distributor of a product? What is the easiest and cheapest way to appeal to an entire group of people? Well, the answer turned out to be memes. While companies have and always will try to use whatever specific trends are hip and with the kids, memes are a lot more nuanced and personal than, say, emojis. The entire novelty of memes is one of connecting with people, and additionally recreating an existing piece of media with your own individuality. Whether it's a personal experience or style of humor, your meme is your special creation, and it says something about you, even if that something is just when your phone is on 1%. It's a way of forming special connections between the creators and the sharers. So, even if on this rare occasion a company will use a decently current meme, seeing them twist a lovable format just to promote a product can feel cheap. There's just no heart in it. And yet, more and more companies are pushing them, trying to break into that sweet spot. It's the same issue with normies, only amplified. Because while a normie might genuinely find the meme funny, an advertisement exists solely to reel you in for a purchase and doesn't really give a damn about what they're parodying. It's the most controlled aspect of culture, bursting in to steal your most personal prized possessions, to wave them in your face like a psychopath, and to blackmail you into giving them money. Even though by that point the meme was dead the moment they got their hands on it. Memes have become, in the eyes of the industry, the very thing we sought to counteract: pop culture. Maybe we've made our current memes so bizarre because we're tired of this cycle. The stranger and more aesthetically confusing something is, the less likely any casual is going to find value in it, and the longer it will remain niche. But at the same time, that would imply that current memes have absolutely no inherent comedic value, which is false. Surreal, dark humor is not new by any means. Take, for example, the Tim and Eric Awesome Show. I'm a huge fan of the creators and their work for the sheer ability they possess to masterfully utilize the aesthetics of absurdity to create emotion in their work. The Tim and Eric Awesome Show showcases some of the best of this brand of humor available. Many of their skits for the show revolve around unusual and surreal parodies of culture, for example, the infamous "It's a Free House for You, Jim" comedy sketch. It takes something so inherently uninteresting and amateur and recreates it, using the lack of entertainment value to develop something both humorous and slightly unsettling. It uses a form of media characterized by amateur production and uncomfortable presentation and exploits those aesthetic components to evoke a reaction. Regardless of its inherent lack of direction, it takes a skilled individual to create dark, absurdist comedy like in the Tim and Eric Awesome Show. It's more than just structuring a written joke and timing its delivery, it requires harmony between everything involved, from the visual aspect to the sound design to the acting. This is true for any type of effective visual humor, but again, that just goes to show you that constructing surreal dark comedy takes just as much effort and is just as valid as other types of humor. Additionally, it's not easy to scare people. So, making your work unsettling as well as entertaining is a very complicated business. While there are far few factors to account for with surreal memes, the use of aesthetics and emphasis are still in practice. It's not a talentless form of comedy. There is a reason why we find it funny. But that being said, I believe that the Tim and Eric Awesome Show and these memes share more in their style than just absurdism. A lot of the surreal comedy we see in these memes is based upon satirizing something inherently unfunny, like in the Tim and Eric sketches. However, unlike past forms, many of these memes are not just criticizing movies, games, comics, or other forms of mainstream media, they're satirizing themselves. The "this is so sad, can we hit 50 likes" meme was just making fun of bad Facebook comedy and how lazy and unfunny memes and meme accounts can be. Deep frying a meme has multiple purposes: replicating the crunchy composition of images that have been ripped off so many times that they're practically unviewable, and using the low quality to increase the meme's aesthetic value. It's like the Tim and Eric sketches, intentionally decreasing the quality in one area to increase its value in another. We've seen an increase in the use of old memes or things that were not inherently funny in the first place for the purpose of ironic enjoyment, all alongside the chaotic absurdism. Modern memes are rejecting commercialism in pop culture, embracing the dark and meta, bathing themselves in irony. Maybe there is some psychological despair that's triggered this. Maybe the 24-hour news cycle and the constant circulation of information around the world through the internet has made us collectively more cynical. Or maybe this embracing of the unusual is just the next step for the outsiders, rejecting the meme culture they created and all fundamental pillars of internet comedy, to start anew with a fresh form of counterculture. Maybe this is just the next wave.